Passover is the holiday of storytelling. So I'll tell you a story. My mother's father's family is from Erie, Pennsylvania. It's a small industrial town that was really big at the time that canal shipping was really big. I don't know much about the history of Schenectady, but I imagine that there's a similar time period of a heyday. The whole family used to go every year to Erie for Seder. Now, my mother has all these memories of growing up attending, but the truth is that my mother's memories are mostly of stories of her father's attending, because my mother grew up in a household where her father was a rabbi, and they had to stay where he was the rabbi of a congregation and didn't get to travel for Passover, something that I am familiar with in my own life. But my grandfather, Roy Tannenbaum, has 4 younger brothers and about 1 million first cousins, because his father was one of 11 or 12. And they all still live in Erie or Cleveland, in that area around there. And they all come back every year for Seder. My grandfather's youngest brother still lives there and hosts the Seder now. And I've never been. But I remember the stories of people 2 generations back who attended. I remember the story of Uncle Mo, who that year was an egg salesman. Uncle Mo was always doing different things. But that year he was an egg salesman, and he had all of the eggs in one of the cooler rooms of the house. And the cousins found the eggs and had a big egg fight in the middle of Seder. Well, I wasn't there. That happened before I was born and happened before my mother was born, but I remember the story. Passover is the storytelling holiday. So let me tell you a story. I remember when I visited my relatives in Erie, they would show us the way that the house had changed over the generations of the people living in it. When it was built, my great-great-great-grandfather who built the house, he thought that electricity was a fad, and so he made sure to have kerosene lamps put in, and you could still see the kerosene lamps. Of course, the house now was lit. When I would visit my great-grandparents there, it was lit with electric. Guess that wasn't so much of a fad. I remember playing with the laundry chute. My booby taught me to play cards and checkers. We never went for Seder, but we did go once or twice a year. My Altazeda was a veteran. He served in World War II. He served in Italy. I have his dog tags. And he would tell stories of how when everybody else in his platoon were killed and he thought he was going to be captured, he buried his dog tags because they have an H on them, and he didn't want to be caught by the Italian forces and have them know that he was Jewish, so he buried his identification tags. I guess he got new ones, because I definitely have them. When I was growing up, most of the time we had Seder at my parents' house, but sometimes we went to my mother's parents' house in Toronto. We would drive up there and spend the whole week. That house was set up with a downstairs finished basement with my grandfather's study and some couches. And I remember as an 8 or 9-year-old staying up as late as I could at the Seder and then taking a short nap in the middle of the end of Magid or during the meal portion, and then waking back up to finish the Seder with the family. But I would lie down on the couches where you could still hear everything that was going on in the dining room, because there was an open floor plan. It was just stairs going down to the lower level. Growing up, my Seders started at 6 p.m. and ended at 2 or 2:30 a.m. That's not a length of Seder that works for me anymore. I think it really worked for my parents because both of them at that time were teaching at schools, and my mother wasn't a pulpit rabbi during those formative years, and I think if she had been, she probably would have insisted that we end early enough that she could be a functioning human being at synagogue the next day. As a current pulpit rabbi, I think ending Seder at a time where I can still string words together the next day is fairly crucial. But I remember really great conversations and insights. The time that the theme of Seder was 250 years of American Jewry. The time that the theme of our Seder was what's called bibliodrama, where everybody gets a character from the story and has to enact that character. Creative Seders, interesting Seders. Seders with people who are no longer with us, and with people who, God willing, will be with us for many decades. Everybody has stories of holidays past, and Passover is the storytelling holiday. Passover is the holiday where we put ourselves into the story. I've said this before, and I'm sure I will say it again. But the Haggadah, which means the telling, is not the story of the Exodus from Egypt. If we wanted to tell that story, we would open up the book of Exodus and read it. It is the story of the Jewish people's telling of the Exodus from Egypt. It's our story. And if you don't put your family stories into that story, there's something missing. That's why we say that anybody who embellishes, who elongates, right, the Seder is to be worthy of praise. That's why the Seder says, in every generation you should see yourself as if you personally went out. It's not enough just to tell the story as it was given to us, but we have to put ourselves into the story. We just read the Haftarah from Isaiah, which describes the ultimate redemption. And it describes it by way of telling a story. The story, to me, it's not that It's not that the prophet really thought that the nature of the animals would change by divine providence, that all of a sudden animals of prey would no longer eat. I think it's a powerful metaphor because it concretizes, it gives us an image, a story with which we can understand what redemption really looks like. Kind of similar to Abraham Lincoln's use of the imagery of a house in order to describe the nation. A house divided cannot stand. It wasn't really about architecture, it was about nationhood. And I think that Isaiah similarly, it's not about biology or these particular animals. It's about telling a story about what redemption looks like. Our congregation is doing some strategic planning, some visioning, some thinking about what the next 3 to 5 years of our congregation might look like. It's a process of storytelling. We're telling a story both about our synagogue's past and about where we're going in the future, similar to what Isaiah is doing. We have to make the language that we use specific enough that it describes for us a direction, that it puts ourselves into the story. On Seder night, we split the matzah and we take the bigger matzah and we put it away for the end of the Seder. As if to say, the greater redemption is yet to come. Passover is the holiday of redemption. It's the redemption where God redeemed the Jewish people from Egypt. And God did that. But that wasn't enough. That was only step one of the redemption. The greater redemption, the redemption that's described in today's Haftarah, the redemption of the Messianic era, the redemption of an end to war, an end to death. That is the future redemption. That is the redemption yet to come. How do we bring about that future redemption? What do we do to bring about the future redemption? I believe we tell stories. We tell the stories of the ones that we loved who are no longer with us. And by telling those stories, we bring their values into the forefront of our mind. We change ourselves as we go forward based on the values that they held dear. We bring redemption into the world, God willing, by honoring the memory of our loved ones. And so it's fitting that we are about to turn to the Yizkor service, the service of memory, the service of storytelling, which on the 8th day of Passover connects the idea of putting ourselves into the story to the idea of redemption, the 8th day, the day after the Shabbat, the day after the 7 complete days of the week. The 8th day is the day of redemption. May we bring redemption speedily into the world by honoring, remembering, and telling the stories of the ones that we love. Chag Sameach.